Diamond. Cyclo.
So I'm at Central Market looking for what once was the main form of public transportation in Phnom Penh. And they are commonly known as Cyclos or Cycle-Rickshaws, or more traditionally Vélo-Pousse, which is French for bicycle push. And the Cyclo is essentially a tricycle designed to carry passengers on a for-hire basis. And in Phnom Penh, you see them slowly and quite majestically roaming the city streets, or quite often taking a nap in what can be best described as recliners on wheels. And as it turns out, they are deeply rooted in Cambodian, Vietnamese, and even French history. So as a professional urban planner who's worked with informal transport in Asia and Africa, naturally these guys caught my eye. And I was curious to find out more about how they emerged, who they are, what their day-to-day looks like. And so in this video, I will share my findings from researching them, riding them, and interviewing them. 1 second, let me show you one of the favorite Cambodian pastimes, and then we'll start the video. So before going to meet them in person, I did some searching online to see what we could find. And besides old photographs and cyclo-tour companies for tourists, there's very little information about their actual history. But I kept digging, and here's what I found, and it's actually quite fascinating. We begin in the 19th century in what was at the time French Indochina, which was essentially a grouping of French colonial territories in Southeast Asia, including present-day Cambodia, Vietnam, and Laos. During this time, the French colonialists observed a human-powered rickshaw, which they saw as a harsh and cruel means of transportation. It's really kind of like a wheelbarrow for humans. But anyway, in the early 1930s, the French Ministry of Public Works began trials of this 3-wheel pedal-powered alternative, which they even showcased in Paris together with a big publicity campaign that even involved the legendary Tour de France winners, who publicly tested these designs. And in 1933, after the first prototypes had been built, a man named Pierre Coupeau designed and built his own to bring to French Indochina. He had been living in Phnom Penh since the early 1920s and owned a local bicycle company. He managed to obtain a contract from the local government to develop his prototype of what he called the Vélo-Pousse, aka the present-day Cyclo. And he tried to do the same some 320 kilometers away in Saigon. However, the authorities there, they weren't interested. They thought his idea was simply too revolutionary. And so he had the brilliant marketing idea to host the Great Cyclo Trial of 1936. And on February 9th, 2 local cyclists got on a Vélo-Pousse and started making their way towards Saigon. The duo traveled day and night, making the 320-kilometer trip in just 17 hours and 20 minutes, considerably faster than any human-powered rickshaw could do. The display was a huge success. Now that sounds like a trip worth repeating. And when they made it to Saigon, the event was such a huge success and received so much publicity that the mayor himself, he relented and he allowed 20 of these cyclos to operate on his city streets. And by 1940, almost every human-powered rickshaw in Saigon had been replaced by the new Cyclo, which is quite evidently the word for cyclo. And in the 1950s, following World War II, when the French finally withdrew from Cambodia and Vietnam, which brought them their independence, the cyclo still endured as the popular means of transportation, simply because it was superior to bicycles for hauling cargo and groups of people. And with their newfound independence, both countries regained control over domestic manufacturing. And because the cyclos are fairly easy and inexpensive to build, and many of the materials required can be found in local markets, both countries began manufacturing cyclos of their own. And so, throughout the 1950s and 60s, the cyclos continued to grow in numbers and popularity. So this takes us to 1975, to the end of the Vietnam War, and here I couldn't find much more information on Cambodia, so the next section is mostly focused on Vietnam. In 1975, after the fall of Saigon, when the Vietnamese War ended and the country came under communist rule, the new authorities organized the cyclo drivers into large cooperatives, essentially formalizing their status as a form of public or shared transport. And this takes us to 1986, when Vietnam underwent the Doi Moi economic revolution, and I'm going to call this next section Moto Mobility in Ho Chi Minh City. And in the mid-1980s, Vietnam opened up their borders and their economy to the world, and together with rising incomes, this led to an influx of motorbikes, which quickly replaced non-motorized vehicles like bicycles and cyclos. And these motorized two-wheelers offered a fast, flexible, cheap, and effortless mode of transport, especially considering the hot climate. And with that, the cyclos were outcompeted, and they only really had one market left, and that was to move very large and heavy goods that couldn't be carried by motorbike. And if you've been to Vietnam, then you already know that people will carry just about everything on a motorbike. And as the motorbike began to dominate and now make up more than 90% of the mode share in Vietnam, drivers started complaining that cyclos created traffic because they were slow and wide, and so Vietnamese authorities started forcing the cyclos off the major streets. This takes us into the millennium, and by the mid-2000s, the cyclos had been pretty much banned in every major city in Vietnam. And in Cambodia, the government authorities haven't been so strict. However, the market forces at play have definitely not been in their favor. This takes us to present day, so let's end the history chapter here and go see them for ourselves, 86 years since their inception. And to do so, tomorrow morning we're going on a sunrise cyclo ride as part of a Christmas charity event, so see you bright and early. It's 6 a.m. on a Sunday. Who wakes up on a Sunday at 6 a.m.? Apparently the Cambodians, they wake up at 6 a.m. on a Sunday to do some stretching. And the reason why we're up so early is because we're going on a sunrise cyclo tour with some fellow friends and photographers, and hopefully there we can also learn more about the daily lives of the cyclo drivers. We arrived at our starting location, and while waiting for the others to arrive, we got the opportunity to test out one of the cyclos. Here we are, I'm taking Princess for an early morning ride, her human-powered chariot. It's a single gear, so I can't stop pedaling. You can't find the brakes like you would in a normal bike. I have to pull this lever here. And we stop. These guys must have really strong legs.
They have. So how was your first ride?
It was good, it was interesting. But it's nothing like a normal bicycle.
No.
And you need strong legs. These guys must have really strong legs. You want to go ask him how strong his legs are?
Yeah. Hello! You? Strong, huh? Tonton.
We then went for our early morning ride and took over the streets of Phnom Penh like a badass Harley-Davidson crew. Well, actually, it was more like this scene from Wall-E.
Well, then what do you want to do? I don't know. Something.
Wow.
Anyway, our tour went something like this. We departed from Independence Monument and first made our way towards Riverside. And while we're on Riverside, let me give you a little bit more information about the cyclo drivers we were with. And just as a side note, you can see us wearing Christmas hats, and that's because this event was part of a Christmas charity event that took place shortly before Christmas Day. So these cyclo operators we're with today are part of the Cyclo Conservation and Careers Association that supports 280 cyclo drivers. And unfortunately, with the arrival of companies like Grab and Passap that now operate on-demand tuk-tuks, they have suffered and their customer base has significantly dropped. And in more recent years, they've been used mostly for tourism purposes to do city tours. But with the recent outbreak in COVID, the numbers of tourists has decreased, and so their business has decreased. And just a quick note on COVID, if we all look somewhat careless, it's because Cambodia, through a mix of luck, strategy, and environmental factors, has managed to escape the worst of the pandemic. Here in Cambodia, there's been 0 deaths, and at the time of recording, there were 0 cases in the country. And yes, full acknowledgement that we are truly lucky to be able to continue living fairly normal lives, obviously with just some extra precautions and much fewer tourists in the city and country. Okay, now back to the tour. We then went around Wat Phnom, an ancient Buddhist temple and also roundabout, and then continued on towards the iconic Art Deco Central Market, which was built in 1937 in the French colonial period, and at the time it was the biggest market in Asia. We then continued towards the contrastingly modern Vatanak Tower, aka the Rosewood Hotel, which is meant to look like a big dragon. However, if you ask me, it looks a lot more like a snail, which is where I offered to give my driver a little break. So naturally, as a cycling activist, I had to give it a try. It's very pleasant. You sit tall on these bicycles and you have a really nice perspective on the city. You tower over the cars, which is probably why the cyclo drivers seem to carry this much wisdom. To complete the tour, we headed back towards Independence Monument, and as you might have seen from the history section, this tour took place on the very same streets where the cyclos used to dominate. But today, they are far and few between, and according to CCCA, back in 1999, there were 1,500, yet today there are fewer than 300. To better understand the recent disappearance, let's take a break from the cyclo tour and take a look at Phnom Penh's evolution over the past 2 decades, which has very much shaped the modern-day city. So we're in Phnom Penh, the capital of Cambodia, in one of the countries with the fastest growing economies in the world. And here in the capital, this translates into rapid expansion, both upwards and outwards, and it doesn't look like the construction boom will stop anytime soon. And everywhere you look, old buildings are being torn down, and as you can see, without much health and safety. And in their place, placeless towers are being erected next to misplaced architecture. And case in point, this even includes a fake Paris, which is on Diamond Island, and this was empty marshland with a couple farms only back in 2008. And much of this boom is financed by foreign direct investment coming into Cambodia, especially from China. Since 2008, investors from China have poured in more than $11.5 billion into Cambodia, which is great because it's lifting many people out of poverty. However, there is a growing and widening wealth gap, with most of this wealth being concentrated in the upper classes, but more on that in a future video. And with that, the city is rapidly modernizing and motorizing, leaving little room for non-motorized forms and traditional forms of transport. And in 5 years, it is likely there will be so many cars and so much congestion, which will create an ever stronger case to eradicate these slow, bulky modes of transport. Don't get me wrong, progress is good, but in my view, this is all happening too fast and is fueled too much by foreign interest. And with that, heritage is being lost, and not just traditional buildings are being torn down, but also modes of transport and ways of life are disappearing forever. And with that, the city is losing part of its charm and part of its identity. And in 10 years, we might look out our car window, stuck in ever-increasing congestion, and look up at placeless glass buildings and think back nostalgically of what once was with a feeling of regret. And this loss of heritage also extends to the cyclos. So on that note, let's go back to the cycle tour. Kasi, how was it?
It was amazing.
It was amazing.
I love my ride. You're the best.
So this marks the end of our tour, and I have to say that this was a very comfortable experience. It felt like we were sitting in armchairs, but being taken on a journey through the city. We saw all the key monuments. So it's a really pleasant way to explore our city, our home. Despite the positive experience they deliver, as mentioned, they do face an existential threat. Thankfully, there is an association that supports the cyclos, known as the Cyclo Conservation and Careers Association. And after the tour, I took the opportunity to speak to the man in charge. You set up the Cyclo Association?
Yeah, right. In 1999.
And he is on a mission to improve their quality of life. And through CCCA, he supports 280 drivers by providing them with basic washing facilities, medical care, driver training, and a small daily stipend. They are not yet a fully fledged Cambodian NGO, and their funding is very limited, so I will include a link to donate in the description below. Now we're off to interview some cyclo drivers. So now let's go learn a little more about the lives of cyclo operators firsthand. And because my Khmer is very limited to do so, I'll be meeting up with Sotea and Sovan, my Cambodian bongs and colleagues from work. And just as a relevant side note, here in Cambodia, we are all uncles and brothers depending on our relationship and age. Hello, gentlemen. How are you?
I'm fine.
So I'd be very interested to hear more about your lives as cyclo drivers. But first, Uncle, tell me, how old are you?
I am 88 years now.
Oh wow, and how about you, brother?
I am 42 years old.
And tell me, how long have you been riding your cyclo?
10 years.
Oh, 10 years. And how about you, Uncle?
Oh, I started cycling after the marriage.
Oh, you started that long ago. And are you from Phnom Penh or from another province?
Oh, I am from Sweden.
And how about you, brother?
I am from Freebanks.
Uncle and brother, speaking frankly, why did you choose to become cyclo drivers?
Frankly speaking, I am poor. Yeah, because I am poor and have no other job besides cycling.
So as I understand it, you live and sleep in your cyclos on the side of the road.
Oh yeah, that is our daily life.
And where is your preferred sleeping spot? Oh, so you sleep outside the Angkor cinema. Do you have to pay to stay there?
Oh, I pay nothing. I only pay for the cyclo rental. It's about 2,000 real per day.
And if you live outdoors, how do you stay clean?
Pay only 200 real per water bucket.
And how about you, Uncle?
Oh, it's the same. We spend about 4,000 real for daily food.
And Uncle, please tell me, how is life as a cyclo driver these days?
Oh, a big shortage of income now.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear. What kind of income shortage?
I am poor.
And tell me, how about you, brother?
Yeah, our time is tough right now.
And now with this COVID situation, how has that affected your daily income and livelihood?
Yeah, COVID does affect on our daily income. Now we get less and less from day to day.
Nowadays, is there more or fewer cyclo drivers on the streets of Phnom Penh?
Oh, less and less now. If without any conservation made by the Prime Minister, and then the population will go down.
And do you happen to know the current population of cyclos in Phnom Penh?
Oh, in the past, it's more than 7,000.
Oh wow, 7,000. And how about now?
So now we have around 308 cyclo.
And since starting your career as a cyclo driver, how has your income been?
So I could earn in between 40,000 to 70,000, and now it declined to only 30,000 real per day.
Oh, that's a big reduction. And how has the arrival of tuk-tuks affected business?
Oh, the arrival of tuk-tuk does affect on my daily income.
And Uncle, you are of great age. Will you be able to continue riding your cyclo in the future?
Yeah, I still could do it.
Great, you're still full of energy. And how about you, brother?
Yeah, I'm fit to it. I'm riding it every day.
And Uncle and brother, tell me, how long have you been part of the Cyclo Association?
Oh, it's quite recent. It was last 2 years. Yes, it's about 2 years. The same as Uncle.
And why did you decide to become a member of the Cyclo Association?
Yeah, I joined to get the government subsidy.
Okay, and what kind of support did you get from the government?
To get some support on the supplement on the shortage of income, and also to get a cyclo for a daily rise and become a member of the association in order to get the daily supplement from the government. Yeah, we got about 7,000 real stipend for the daily meal.
And Uncle, do you plan to ever retire?
Oh, I will quit when I have no energy to ride more.
Okay, so when you no longer have the energy. And you, brother, you look strong. How about you?
Oh, I really have no idea.
And tell me, brother, you are young, and Uncle, you're old. Which one of you earns more money?
Yeah, I'm not proud of myself, but I earn more because people give me more money because they see me old.
That was really insightful. Thank you, Uncle, and thank you, brother.
Yeah, thank you, thank you.
This brings us nicely to the end of the video, so I really hope it was somewhat educational or at least entertaining. And on a final note, I don't know about you, but I do not believe that progress and development should necessarily be defined by how many towers we build or how nice the cars are on our roads, and that perhaps progress should not mean that the past is made obsolete. Because to be happy as a society, we need a strong identity. And our identity comes from our heritage, so when shaping the future, we should look to the past. And Cambodia is a country and has a culture with a very rich history. And this should be cherished and celebrated. And yes, I fully acknowledge that the Cyclo is a fusion of French, Khmer, and Vietnamese culture. And yes, the business model also needs to change. But instead of blindly driving them to extinction, perhaps there are better ways to better integrate them and upgrade them. Whether it's through electrification or using on-demand apps. Singapore, for example, When they set out to formalize informal street vendors, they created the now famous hawker centers, a very popular attraction for both locals and tourists, which are essentially a designated space where those who were once street hawkers can now perform their business. And yes, it's different to what it once was, but at least it's not completely lost. And through this video, I can really only ask one thing from you. If you live in or are ever visiting Phnom Penh and you're not in a hurry, do make sure to take a Cyclo. They are comfortable, cheap, ecological, and most of all, the drivers, they are charming. And together, we can help them reach their 100th birthday instead of blindly eradicating them. One more thing. To raise awareness and funds, Daniela and I are seriously considering repeating the great cyclo trial of 1936. So if you're somewhere around, feel free to join us. The plan is essentially to cycle from Phnom Penh to Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam, assuming the borders reopen in the near future. It won't be quite like cycling across Belgium. Check out my last video to see what that's all about. But until then, stay tuned. I have lots of interesting videos in the works. Take good care, guys. Thanks for watching. This is by far my most elaborate production to date, and this is exactly the type of content I aspire to create, essentially a merging of my interests in travel, urbanism, and sustainable development. Your feedback and suggestions are very welcome, and I would like to say a big thanks to the Summer Project and team for bringing me to Cambodia, to CCCA for keeping the cyclo culture alive, and to everyone that featured in the video, including uncle and brother. And I'm pleased to say that brother was one of the very first to get to watch the video, and he even let us borrow his cyclo for a work-related event. So feel free to like and subscribe and or follow me on my various social media channels. That's it from me. Take good care, guys.